Welcome, welcome, welcome. Health Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain. Truly excited about today's show. It's a show that will educate you, and we're going to go right ahead with it. We have an awesome guest. Believe me, she comes well recommended more than anything. Everybody knows I always talk. My wife's a social worker and keeps me well informed. But Stacie Leblanc, she's an attorney, master's in education. She's the executive director of New Orleans Children's Advocacy Center, and we're here to talk about child sexual abuse. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me, Chris.
Well, we're excited to have you here. We're really honored. First, let's kind of give a general overview of kind of what you do and what's going on.
Well, I operate two nonprofit programs out of Children's Hospital. We actually operate the programs in a cottage off Audubon Park to provide like a child-friendly location. So whenever there's been an allegation of abuse, whether it be sexual abuse or severe physical abuse, the child and their family will come to our home-like setting in order that they can be forensically interviewed to make sure that these interviews are non-leading and non-suggestive, and non-shaming and non-blaming at the same time. Our program also offers medical exams so that children can have a non-threatening, non-intrusive type of examination so that there's no more trauma than what that child's already entailed. We want to collect any evidence, and we work with the police and the prosecutors and also with child protection for the safety of the child.
Okay, let's start at the home. A parent, obviously it's the parent most of the time. It's a little child or suspects or knows about, all right, my child has been abused. How do they get to your agency? They call the police or something, and they get to your agency. Let's go through that, but then they get there. The child has to, so y'all work it out where the child explains what's going on.
Exactly, and you're right. It was so correct, Chris, in that most of the cases it is someone that's trusted and known to the child. Okay. In a lot of cases, there's also a non-offending parent. It might be that mom doesn't know that there's been something going on, right, or it could be that there's someone close to the parents and neither parent knows. So typically there's a report that's made. Maybe it's a teacher or a doctor or a mandatory reporter, or just that parent calls the police. They might call 911. And then in that case, the detectives don't necessarily, they don't interview the child. What they do is they come and tell the child exactly what's going to happen and for the family. They're then sent to our cottage. The police and child protection, if they need to be involved, if we think a parent might be involved, they'll be there. And they actually watch the interview of the child in a monitoring room. They have an earbud in their ear, and they watch so that that child doesn't have to tell repeated folks. You know, it used to be that a child might have to tell 9 people before a case would go to court. You know, the road officer and the detective on the scene and the child protection investigator. Now they're coming to a home-like setting, they're interviewed in a child-friendly environment, and the team watches the interview, and then they ask their questions to the interviewer via an earbud. That trained forensic interviewer then makes sure they ask non-leading, non-suggestive questions, and it's all videotaped.
Okay. Explain forensic real quick. What does that mean? Forensic
is by definition, is just the application of basically legal concepts to science.
Okay, good. All right, that's good. We wanted to make sure we're clear there. So, this child is interviewed and we get the information. Does the child have to express that again after they've talked to you? Is that it for the child, or do they have to go sit on a witness stand?
They actually do have to take the stand and at least give an oath of telling the truth, like any other. And because constitutionally the defendant has a right to confront the child, at least in that courtroom setting. But these videotapes, it's an exception to hearsay, and in our state it's admissible. So the child doesn't have to say, for lack of a better word, all the gory details in open court. That tape and that child at the age of that first disclosure speaks for itself. So the child might take the stand, but that videotape tells about the abuse.
So wonderful.
It really is. It works fabulous. It truly does, and it's the best for the children, and it's the best for the criminal justice system also.
Okay, good. Now, what is sexual abuse?
Well, child sexual abuse, by definition, there's a number of different crimes that define child sexual abuse. From a personal and a parental standpoint, I think child sexual abuse is anything where the child feels uncomfortable concerning their body. And we try to make sure that children understand that, their discomfort, we want their radar to go off sooner rather than when the touching actually progresses, for prevention.
Before the touching actually progresses.
Right.
In other words, if somebody is suggesting by their behavior, words, or actions sexual images or whatever,
absolutely,
words,
right,
way before. In other words, I have to use it. It's a biblical example. If you think about lusting before a child and that child receives that becomes abuse.
And by definition, by state law, by definition, if someone sends a child a text message that indicates they want to have some type of sexual contact, that's a crime. And if we can get kids to understand that in and of itself, that discussion, what we call sometimes the seduction or grooming process that a perpetrator would use on a child, if we can get their radar to go off then, and for all the adults to be aware of that, then we could protect kids before there's an actual act, is one aspect of what we do in protection.
Okay, good.
On prevention.
Can a parent, and I know we're going to deal totally with prevention, but can a parent, or not the abusing parent obviously, but how can a parent know that, predict ahead of time if somebody's going to abuse their child? Is it possible?
There really isn't a profile that, there's nothing magic that I can say that I could predict that someone's going to abuse a child. But I do know that we offer a free program in the Orleans community through Children's Trust Fund and through Children's Hospital. It's a 3-hour program. It's called Darkness to Light. And it literally trains parents and adults, all adults, everyone, because it's not just a parental responsibility. I mean, I might see your kids, in the grocery store. If all adults raise their consciousness, then we can truly protect abuse. And we train the adults with 7 simple steps about raising their consciousness, their awareness of different signs and symptoms that might be that radar piece, and then also what can they do as an adults to limit or restrict one-on-one time where most abuse occurs. And it works. I mean, the evidence has shown that we can have reduction in child sexual abuse actually occurring if we could get 5% of our population trained. They have shown in repeated evidence-based programs that we will be able to reduce child sexual abuse in our community.
Limiting one-on-one time. In other words, no one should be totally alone with children as much as possible.
That is one of the basic steps of Darkness to Light, Chris, is that we need to try to reduce one-on-one time. We know one-on-one time is really healthy for tutoring and all kind of other counseling, but how can we make it safe? So it's not just saying we're eliminating it, but how can we make sure that there's no expectation of total privacy with a child? That in and of itself is a huge protective factor.
In other words, no locked doors.
No locked doors. In classrooms, don't put, pictures over the windows that are there. Let's make sure that we have this consciousness that no one has an expectation of being completely alone with that child. And then how can we do it as parents? If we hire a babysitter, well, sure, that babysitter is going to be alone with our child, but what can we do to reduce the expectation? So you could have like a neighbor that say, okay, you're going out, you have a babysitter, I have a babysitter. I'm going to check in on your babysitter. Will you check in on my babysitter? Just to be creative. And then you're telling your babysitter, I have a trusted neighbor, grandmother, who's just going to come by and stop in and check on y'all. And you're checking in on them. I mean, that in and of itself lets whoever it is that you did trust with your child to understand there is no unlimited time, restricted privacy with my child.
It's not your child. And even if it is your child, it's not totally yours. You have a responsibility. Society has a responsibility. Now, I'm not going to profiling, but I have to look at men versus women. A whole lot more men than women. Would we agree?
Yeah, I would say in the 23 years I've been doing this as a prosecutor for 10 and then in running these nonprofits, that yes, we have substantially more allegations and convictions against male perpetrators of child sexual abuse than females.
I think we had a guest on the other day is probably in the range of 95% to 5% in that area. Not that the women, somebody mentioned, it's not that women don't abuse, but there's usually some contributing factor, drug abuse, there's something else going on, some other male have abused, but just using the word by nature doesn't totally describe it, but for the most part, we're dealing with a male issue, whether it's on boys or whether it's on little girls.
Right, and what we don't know, because if we look back historically, we didn't have disclosures in prosecution with anyone. So we don't know if there is female abuse that's going on and we just don't know about it because it's still so taboo.
Okay.
You know, have I been made aware of cases where there was female sexual abuse? Yes, it is rare.
It does occur, right.
And you're absolutely right that typically there might be substance abuse involved. It might be that they were an accessory to the crime that was being committed by, say, the mother's paramour, the mother's boyfriend, dad, or something of that nature that they didn't tell.
Good. Now, next one, male out of fathers, not counting uncles and, you know, basketball coaches and priests, clergy. Fathers, biological versus stepfathers. Any differences? I know it's not totally all in every because there are biological fathers that abuse, but is it a lot more with step-parenting or, you know, boyfriends?
You know, the research is not 100% clear on this particular factor. I can tell you in our own program, males in the household definitely, you know, are probably our #1 category that we see. And if you broke it down, I would say as far as biological father as opposed to unrelated male in the household, it's not very different. Okay. It's not substantially different.
It's nuts.
And it changes each year, so I can't say it's always one way or the other.
Okay, now, so for a mother then, that leaves more than likely the mother is the person that is a part of this victimhood.
Yes, absolutely. The non-offending parent is a victim. And it's very, very difficult. Because imagine any of us, if the person we trusted most, that we, you know, have a relationship, you know, it's hard to believe that they would even lust after a child, much less hurt our child.
Her husband, her boyfriend, her...
So their natural reaction is denial, that they don't want to believe it. None of us would. And so we make sure that we reach out to that non-offending parent because we know no matter how well the system works in protecting that child from that offender, what that child wants more than anything is for their parent to believe them. And so if their non-offending parent, let's say it's mom, doesn't believe them or they're in that denial state, a lot of kids, what they'll talk about is that was the hardest thing for them, that their mom didn't believe them. And so we really do see that it's our jobs in a Children's Advocacy Center and the Audrey Hepburn Care Center to reach out to mom and say, we know how hard this is for you, and we're here for you too, and we're going to provide free counseling for you, and we're going to, you know, go through this with you. And you know, we understand that it would be wonderful, you know, and that mom wants more than anything in the world to believe this isn't true, and we get that, but we gotta go from that state of denial to this terrible reality.
Particularly when we define that sexual abuse happens before the touch, so that becomes more complex for the mom to assume that something happened, and the child, the issues are murky. In a sense, it's not pure penetration, and you know then it becomes. There's
so many elements, right? And that grooming process goes on for so long to gain that child's trust and to make the child, on some level, believe that, you know, in a lot of cases they're trying to get the child to believe it's their idea to engage in this activity, you know, and groom them along the way so that that child has this internal sense of guilt and shame that they're afraid if I tell you, you know, that you're going to think it was my idea because I was convinced by this terrible perpetrator. And, you know, they have so many, I like to say that perpetrators have so many tools in their toolbox that the tool they don't have to use is force. They psychologically manipulate young children and adolescents through all different means to gain their trust and access.
They psychologically manipulate, so they don't have to use force, and they use years and months and time.
Absolutely.
Because they're driven by what. All right, help. If you can give us, is there a method? Is there a general pattern by which this abuse happens? Does it start at, again, as you say, through thought and mind, stages? Is anything you can help us with there?
No, I mean, we typically see a grooming process. It's the rare cases where it might be a one-time event. I mean, typically it's happening over time for kids, and it usually progresses over time, the different acts. Perpetrators do come, there's those rare cases where a perpetrator might do that one-time type of touching, but typically it's over time, and they've groomed this child, and at some point that child's not disclosing. And the majority of our victims, the majority of our child victims, do not tell for a very long period of time. And that's why it's so important that if ever someone tells you that they've been abused, that even though the first thing that might come to your mind is, why didn't you tell? That's the most blaming and shaming question.
Talk about this. Spend some time right there.
Okay, but truly, if someone tells you, if your mother tells you on her deathbed, I've never told anyone, but this happened to me, the thing they want more than anything is for you to say, I'm so proud of you for telling. I believe you. They want to be affirmed. And, unfortunately, what we do is, even parents, because we've told our kids, if anything happens, tell us. And then they tell us, and it happened a long time ago, and our natural reaction is, why didn't you tell me? But when we say that, we're making it sound like somehow it's that child's fault because they didn't tell. And so our natural inclination of what we do, a lot of times, is what adult survivors talk about. It wasn't so much, that they're caught or what that perpetrator did was terrible. But sometimes the aftermath of the people that love them and how they don't believe them initially and embrace their disclosure, and they question their not having told, it causes more harm.
Say it again. You
got to. No, and absolutely. If there's one thing, and I tell everybody in every training, if there's one thing you never want to ask someone who's disclosed is, why didn't you tell? And most questions that start with WH when it comes to child sexual abuse are really harming and blaming. We really...
Why, what, when, and...
Right. We really, in our forensic interviews, we're just getting a narrative. We want to find out from the child. We're not trying to direct. We don't want to lead or suggest. We just want them to tell us what they think is important, and then for us to kind of fill in the pieces and let that team fill in all the pieces, potentially for a jury or for judges.
Okay. Obviously, we're talking about a dysfunctional household. Am I correct?
No, I would not say that. I mean, child sexual abuse can happen in any of our homes, and I don't believe all of us are dysfunctional. I mean, I think that there's a dysfunction that we have perpetrators. I mean, that's an incredible dysfunction.
Okay.
But I do believe, and I've been doing this long enough, that really nice people, child sexual abuse crosses every boundary, every cultural, religious, racial boundary that there ever is and ever will be. And income, absolutely. I mean, we know from some of the research that the higher the education of the non-offending parent, typically mom, that the higher the education, that the more likely the abuse will not be stopped by that individual. So the less likely that your educated mom is going to believe.
More likely the less educated mom will say, what have you done? But the higher educated, status, prestige, destroying the bubble, I can't believe this is happening and nobody should know.
You got it. And that's what folks don't want to talk about, that this happens in my community, all of our communities, it happens in gated communities. Folks just want to focus on, oh, that must happen in a bad neighborhood, or that must happen in, poor neighborhoods. And that's not the case. It's just the secret's held longer.
That's big. Okay. the concept of, obviously there's somebody dysfunctional. The man is dysfunctional. The woman could be functional. The child is functional. The gated community is functional. Everything's functional, but this man is obviously dysfunctional.
Absolutely.
All right. How do we end dysfunctional men?
I don't know that I have the absolute answer to that. I mean, I'd like to say that there is a program that I know about, or I've read about, or I've seen research that says that we can cure pedophilia, but I don't know that has been proven. I mean, I do think that we need to, very early on, the adults be aware to protect the children so that we can eliminate access. We do know that there are treatment programs, but there are no programs that claim to cure child sexual, perpetrators.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, but the question, it begged the question: pornography, sexualized culture, television, the concept of a male highly sexualized as opposed to a male that's not highly sexualized. To me, it's a no-brainer that a highly sexualized male into pornography and strip clubs or whatever would be much more likely to abuse a child as opposed to a man who is not sexualized. He's not an adulterer within his family. To me, the concept of a man that's committing adultery and watching porno movies would be much more likely to abuse a child than a man who doesn't commit adultery, is not into porn, is not sexualized in a sense. He has a healthy relationship, healthy sexualization.
I don't know any research that really that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and from a personal level, those are all not good and healthy things for families. But I don't know of any research that says that those things in and of themselves are indicators that someone would abuse a child. I mean, we've looked at, there's lots of studies that have looked at pedophiles to see, is there anything? Because for a long time, folks believed that every pedophile must have been sexually abused, and they've shown that that's not really the case. Now, the one thing that you bring up, Chris, about what can we do? Well, when it talks about young children, if they have been sexually abused, sometimes they might become what we call sexually reactive to that abuse. If they've been sexualized at a young age, they might start acting out that. And there are incredibly wonderful treatment programs and that actually have proven that it reduces recidivism or eliminates recidivism for juveniles. It's completely different from adults. No one's out there claiming that they can cure adult pedophiles that I know of, or that it has been proven.
But children who are abused are more likely to abuse. That's not said. Or children that were abused are more likely to be promiscuous. Sometimes children who are sexually abused may become reactive to that sexualized behavior because their body might have a physiological response. Something might have felt good. It's confusing to them about, I know this is wrong, but it felt good. And so that's a very confusing thing. And if they don't get the appropriate treatment, and our community is blessed with lots of really great free super treatment programs that make sure that we have this dialogue with children so that they understand that while it might have felt good, why this is a bad thing, and how we can supervise them and make sure that they're in safe environments so that that does not occur, or that they don't get labeled. All right, exactly, because the child, instead of being talked about and dehumanized, they need to be helped. Because
absolutely.
I guess the thing of it is that the visceral thing is when we see somebody highly promiscuous, the thing we always say is that you don't know if that child was abused or not. And we don't know what's causing it. It's not like they're just nasty. You know what I mean? It's something. The reason I'm bringing this in, because we had Clemmy Greenlee on that had the whole issue of sex trafficking and a whole lot of blogs on Times-Picayune about people were arguing a point to say that, wait a minute, let's not get rid of the red light district that has nothing to do with child abuse or abuse at all. Let's not get rid of, in other words, sex workers have nothing to do with it. Pornography or prostitution in and of itself needs to be legalized. And again, viscerally, the whole point of it is when we have this, I call it abhorrent sexuality, it's all in the mix of sexual abuse. We need to get those studies in. Somebody needs to study this. We need all the money in the world.
And you know, you bring up a really good point, like child pornography and even pornography at its basic is a lot of time used in the grooming process. You know, we see case after case where children say the first thing that would happen is that they were shown images by an adult. And, you know, it's like, well, this was left out, because that's like a subtle thing. And then, oh, I shouldn't show you this, don't tell, this is our secret. So pornography, not even just child pornography, is used a lot in the grooming process. And pornography can be incredibly harmful to children because, you know, it's like, let me show you a picture. Now, do you want to act this out? It seems innocent. This is what adults do. Don't you want to be a big girl? You know, this kind of craziness is used. So pornography is very, very dangerous for young children. And I do think we need to do everything we can to protect our kids from pornography. I also do believe, like what you're talking about with the human trafficking, it is so true that a lot of the kids that are on these streets at a very young age, and even the adults, were victims of child sexual abuse. And a lot of the research on that, it's not to say that all children who are abused are going to be promiscuous.
Of course. We wouldn't say that, right?
It's not an inverse correlation. But we do know that there are a lot of, you know, young women and ladies who they weren't supported. It wasn't just that they were sexually abused, but there wasn't that non-offending parent or mom or grandma who said, I'm going to protect you.
30 seconds. If you can look in the camera, if we can hit that camera, give us a take-home message for the people out there to help prevent. Just a quick one.
Oh, well, absolutely. And thank you for this opportunity, Chris. I would just urge anyone in the community, if you want to protect children, we have programs. Call the New Orleans Children's Advocacy Center. We have free programs. If you've got 3 hours, I promise you, you will change the way you parent your children if you go through and become a steward of children. And we would love to be able to help anyone, any community. We'll go into community, into churches, or different groups, after hours, weekends, you know, to help get that message out there, because we really do believe child sexual abuse is preventable.
I think you've heard it. Chris Sylvain, Health Issues. Do everything that you can. These are our children. Thank you. Appreciate you.